Have you ever felt like you were being watched, not just casually observed, but studied, by something that wasn't supposed to be human? That question haunted Ethan Reyes ever since the summer of 2015. Ethan was a seasoned solo hiker from Oregon, cautious but adventurous, always pushing boundaries in search of raw, untouched nature. That July, he decided to explore a remote stretch of forest known only to locals as Red Pine Hollow, a forgotten tract of wildland with a trail so overgrown it hadn't seen foot traffic in years. He'd read online whispers about an abandoned fire lookout tower perched deep within the hollow. No formal path, no rangers, just dense wilderness and a structure that hadn't been maintained in decades. Several forum posts warned the building was technically off limits, structurally unstable, possibly dangerous, but that just added to the intrigue. Ethan wanted isolation, not danger necessarily, but the thrill of vanishing from the map for a few days. The last post he could find was from 3 years prior. Still standing, solid enough to crash for a night, unnervingly quiet, no service. Pack light and pray the wind doesn't pick up, the user had written. Armed with 2 days' worth of gear, a handheld satellite GPS, and his camera gear, Ethan set out in his old Subaru. He parked in a shallow ditch by the road and began cutting through the underbrush just after 11 a.m. The air was thick with pine and silence. No sound except the distant rustle of leaves and the rhythmic crunch of his boots against moss and stone. This wasn't a path. It was more like a series of hopeful guesses strung together by instincts and coordinates. Tree limbs clawed at his jacket. Slopes pitched dangerously. At one point, he nearly slipped into a gully veiled by fern. The deeper he went, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, just the forest, pressing in. By hour 4, exhaustion had set in. His shirt was clinging to him, soaked in sweat. But then, like a mirage, he saw it, the top of the lookout tower, poking just above the treetops like a skeletal crown. As he approached, his heart lifted. It wasn't in great condition, but it wasn't falling apart either. The paint had long peeled away, leaving grayish wood and rusted bolts. Ivy curled around its stilts like constricting fingers. He stepped forward cautiously, pressing against the support beams. They held. The ladder was metal, coated in grime and groaning under weight, but it didn't give way. Slowly, Ethan climbed. Each step creaked like an old man's joints, long, echoing wails that pierced the stillness. When he reached the top, Ethan was stunned. The view was unreal. A panoramic sweep of untouched forest, stretching in every direction like a green ocean. No roads, no rooftops, no signs of human life. The lookout itself was small, barely 150 square feet, just a single room with rotting windows, a decaying bed frame in the corner, and a wooden desk leaning off balance under a spiderweb-covered map. Dust danced in the shafts of light coming through the cracks. Ethan rolled out his sleeping mat, set up his camping stove, and heated a sealed meal pouch. As the sun dipped behind the treetops, he stepped outside onto the narrow walkway that wrapped around the structure. He took a deep breath. The wind was cooler here, crisper. He felt completely alone, and weirdly, it felt perfect. But that peace wouldn't last long. About an hour after nightfall, Ethan noticed something strange. A light, faint, flickering. It was down below, deep in the woods. It wasn't the white LED flicker of a flashlight or headlamp. It was orange, warm, dancing, like a torch. Who the hell uses a torch in 2015? He squinted, watching the light snake slowly between trees. It didn't seem panicked or searching. It moved with purpose, like someone following a familiar path. For nearly 15 minutes, he watched it dance just out of range. Then, it vanished behind a thicket. He waited for it to return, but it never did. Still on edge, Ethan chalked it up to another camper. Weird choice of light, sure, but this place was online. Someone else could have read the same post. Trying to shake it off, he headed back inside and zipped himself into his sleeping bag. The wind outside made the wooden frame groan. Tree limbs tapped occasionally against the glass like skeletal fingers. Around 2 a.m., Ethan woke with a start. No noise, no movement. Then, creak. It was soft, metallic, familiar. The ladder. He held his breath. Creak. Another step. Then another. Someone was climbing the ladder, slowly, deliberately. His pulse spiked. He slipped out of his bag, careful not to make a sound, and grabbed his flashlight. The creaking got louder. Whoever it was, they were almost at the top. He tiptoed to the door and peeked through the cracks. Nothing. Then, as quickly as it began, the creaking stopped. Ethan waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. The only thing louder than the silence was the thud of his own heartbeat. He stepped out onto the walkway, flashlight off, letting his eyes adjust. He moved quietly around the corner, heart pounding, expecting to see someone crouched by the ladder opening, but no one was there. He exhaled in confusion. Had he imagined it? Then, blur, movement. Behind him, footsteps raced along the wooden planks of the walkway, thudding rapidly toward the opposite side. Ethan spun, a figure, tall, dark, sprinting. He only caught a glimpse, flash of a face, eyes locked with his for a split second before it vanished around the corner. He bolted, no hesitation. Grabbing his backpack, he slid onto the ladder and descended as fast as he could. Each rung groaned, his hands slipped. His heart nearly stopped when he looked up and saw someone peeking over the edge. He didn't stop, not until his boots hit dirt. Then he ran, into the trees, into the dark, and behind him, from the direction of the tower, there was no sound at all. No chase, no footsteps, just a forest that once again pretended it had never seen a soul. Ethan didn't stop running until his legs gave out. He collapsed beside a fallen log somewhere deep in the woods, his breaths coming in short, burning gasps. Pine needles clung to his sweat-soaked clothes. His flashlight beam flickered weakly, almost dead. He'd dropped his sat phone in the rush. Worst of all, he had no idea which direction he was facing. His mind raced. Who the hell had been in that tower? And how did they get up there without making a sound? The image replayed in his mind again and again. That face peering over the railing, half hidden by shadows. Something about the eyes. Too wide, too still, almost delighted. For a moment, he considered going back. Maybe it had been a prank, some other hiker messing with him. But deep down, he knew no one else should have been out there, and no one moved like that. When the sun began to rise, the woods turned golden and quiet. A false comfort. Birds chirped again. The wind returned. It was like the forest had woken up from something unnatural. Ethan pulled himself up and looked around. Everything looked the same. No trail, no markers, just endless trees. The only thing he knew for sure was this. He needed to get out of Red Pine Hollow. He decided to head downhill. Rivers usually meant towns or roads. Hours passed. The forest thickened, growing darker even in daylight. At one point, he spotted a black-feathered bird, dead, nailed to a tree. Nailed. He stopped in his tracks. That wasn't nature. Someone had placed it there. Ethan backed away slowly, then noticed another just ahead. Same species, same fate. Nailed, wings spread, forming a trail, a twisted path of death through the trees. And that's when he heard it again. The creaking. Not above him this time, but nearby. Ground level. It wasn't wood moaning under strain. It was metal, swinging, groaning. He followed the sound carefully, cautiously, heart in his throat. That's when he found the second structure. It was a shed, or what used to be one. The roof had collapsed inward, but the walls still stood. An iron door hung off its hinges. Inside, through the gaps in the boards, he saw what looked like a workbench, and above it, dozens of photos, Polaroids, blurry, faded. They were nailed to the inside walls like a grotesque collage, all showing people standing in the forest. Some were clearly unaware they were being photographed. Others seemed to be looking directly at the camera, faces pale, eyes wide. Some of them looked old, decades old. Ethan's stomach twisted when he saw one image near the bottom. A man curled up inside a lookout tower, asleep in a sleeping bag. His sleeping bag. His gear. It was him. The photo had been taken the night before. Suddenly the creaking stopped. A branch snapped behind him. He turned. There was someone standing at the edge of the tree line. Still, watching. There. Head tilted too far to one side like a broken doll. Ethan's flashlight died. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He backed away slowly until the figure faded behind branches. Then he turned and bolted, tearing through the woods blindly, tripping over roots, crashing through brush until he hit a steep slope and tumbled. His body skidded over rocks and dirt until he finally slammed into something solid, concrete. He blinked through the pain, looked up, a drainage culvert, huge, graffiti-covered, rust-streaked. He had no idea how far he'd run, no idea if he was closer to safety or deeper in danger, but anything was better than being out in the open. He slipped inside, crawling on bruised hands and knees, flashlight off. The air smelled of mildew and rot. Rats scattered ahead. A shallow stream of water trickled beneath him. He followed it for what felt like an hour. Then he found it, a campsite, old, decaying. but definitely human-made. There were 3 sleeping bags, moldy, torn, a rusted coffee pot, burned clothes, a pair of shoes, laces still tied, and a journal, half buried beneath. Wet leaves. He opened it. The last entry read, "We're not alone. We thought it was an old ranger, but it's not. It doesn't speak, just stares. It won't come into the light. It's waiting, watching us. One of us is already gone. If you find this, don't follow the birds, don't sleep in the tower." The handwriting was frantic, letters trailing off like they were written mid-run. Ethan looked up, his breath caught. At the far end of the culvert, someone was crawling in, but it wasn't like a normal person. Their limbs moved wrong, disjointed, backwards. The body was thin, stretched, too long. Their eyes reflected the little ambient light with a metallic glint, like an animal's. They were grinning, and they were crawling fast. Ethan didn't think. He ran, back into the forest. His legs were jelly, his lungs screamed, but adrenaline kept him going. He didn't stop until the sky darkened again. This time, when he spotted a clearing, he collapsed in it, breathless, shaking, unsure if he was out of reach or just lost forever. As night fell, something moved behind the trees, but Ethan was too tired to run, too scared to scream, and too late to realize he had never left the hollow at all. The forest was a different beast at night. It was quieter than it should have been, too quiet. Ethan lay on the cold earth, every muscle trembling beneath layers of dirt and sweat. His fingers dug into the soil like a corpse clawing its way out of a grave. The memory of that thing crawling through the culvert burned itself into his mind, its limbs bending backward, its grin frozen, and its eyes reflecting like polished coins. He wanted to believe it was just exhaustion, hallucination, but deep down, he knew it wasn't. That thing had been real, and it had been following him since the tower. He sat up, flashlight long dead, and fumbled for his backpack. Miraculously, the GPS still blinked, barely. He tapped it, hoping to pull up a location, but the display kept glitching. The screen flashed symbols, distorted maps, and lines of gibberish. For a moment, the map even showed 2 blinking dots moving parallel through the forest. He stared, in disbelief. 2 devices? Or 2 people? He clicked the screen off. It didn't matter. He was done trying to understand this place. He had to get out. The next few hours were pure survival. He marched, slept sitting up, ate trail mix in silence, and always, he felt eyes on him. At one point he found a faded wooden sign nailed. High in a tree, red pine watch. Danger. Do not proceed beyond this marker. It was almost comforting. He hadn't imagined it, but the warning came far too late. The deeper Ethan went, the more wrong things became. Birdsong disappeared again. Trees leaned unnaturally, like they were whispering to each other. He passed a noose made of vines, swaying gently with no wind. He crossed a clearing littered with dismembered animal carcasses, arranged in a perfect circle. Then came the recordings. They started as whispers in the distance, garbled voices just out of reach. He thought it was wind at first, but then he heard it clear. "Ethan," he froze. The voice came again, this time behind him. "You shouldn't have come here." It wasn't just speaking his name. It was his own voice, whispering back at him, mocking, echoing, twisting. Ethan broke into a sprint again, running until his lungs gave out and the forest opened unexpectedly. He stumbled into a compound, barbed wire fence, watchtowers, abandoned barracks. The whole thing looked like an old Forest Service station or a weather research base, long forgotten. The place was rusted over, half consumed by nature, but it was real. He climbed through a broken gap in the fence and headed for the main building. Inside there were overturned desks, paper strewn everywhere. The scent of mildew and copper was overwhelming. He found documents in a file cabinet, still legible beneath mold. Project, Red Hollow, 1983. Testing long-term psychological stress exposure in isolated terrain, targeted environments showing magnetic anomaly and increased auditory hallucinations. Volunteers housed in modified fire watchtowers. Subjects monitored via long-range photography. Experiment duration, 90 days. Outcome, terminated. There were names listed, most of them crossed out. Then Ethan saw a photo clipped to the file. His breath caught. It was the same tower he'd slept in, but in this image, the tower was surrounded by a half-dozen figures in lab coats, pointing instruments toward it. Below, a subject sat inside the lookout, face obscured, arms hugging their knees. The timestamp, 1984. A good 30 years before his visit. He turned the photo over. A scribbled message in fading ink. Subject number 9 began talking to himself. Reports of a tall man in the woods. Symptoms escalated until self-harm. Fire lookout decommissioned. Facility closed. The hollow never lets go. Ethan backed away from the folder. Footsteps sounded above him. Then came a dragging sound, like someone pulling their feet across the floor. He ducked behind a rusted filing cabinet. Something moved down the hallway, deliberate, slow, bare feet, slapping wetly on the tile. Then a whisper. "You shouldn't have come here, Ethan." The same distorted voice. His voice, layered with others now. A chorus of him. He burst from his hiding place and bolted out of the building. As he ran past one of the towers, something stepped into his path. He skidded to a stop. It was himself, but twisted. Same face, same clothes, but the skin sagged, eyes sunken, and its mouth hung open in a permanent scream. Then without a word, it charged. Ethan screamed and turned, crashing through the woods once again, blood pumping, fear overwhelming his thoughts. He didn't stop until he hit asphalt, a road. He almost cried. Up ahead, a ranger station stood, modern and well-lit. He ran to it, heart hammering. He burst inside, rambling nonsense to the startled ranger. Something about a man in the woods, the tower, the bodies, the photos. The ranger, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, remained calm. She listened, then nodded slowly. "You're not the first," she said quietly. "What?" Ethan whispered. The ranger gestured toward a row of missing persons posters along the back wall, most of them recent. One from 2014 caught his eye. It was him, same name, same photo, but the details said he'd gone missing over a year ago. That wasn't possible. He'd only been gone 3 days. "No," Ethan muttered. "That's not me. That can't be me." The ranger's face changed. Her expression turned cold. Her eyes dimmed. "You were never meant to leave," she said. And that's when the walls around him flickered. The light bulbs above him began to pop, one by one. The posters faded. The desk cracked apart like old wood, and the room fell away. Ethan opened his eyes. He was back, in the lookout tower. Daylight burned through the windows. His backpack sat where he'd left it, his sleeping bag half unzipped. He blinked, heart pounding. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? But then, outside the glass, he saw something new. A row of photographs, nailed along the outer railing. He stepped outside. Each image showed him, sleeping, eating, walking, moments from the past 3 days. The last photo showed him, standing right there, on the lookout balcony, staring at the camera, and in the reflection of the window behind him. A second Ethan stood watching, grinning. A sound came from the ladder below. The creaking had returned, but this time, Ethan didn't run. He stood still, because somehow, in the twisted logic of Red Pine Hollow, he understood. You don't escape the hollow. You become part of it, just like the others, forever.